Georgia going to Kentucky, a 22.5-point favorite. Game is at 3:30 Eastern, and they are all business. Like you would think after, they got the big win in Athens over Tennessee, and then they go and play Mississippi State in Starkville. Kirby's smart. I don't know how much Georgia fans appreciate this or don't appreciate this, but he's reminding me more and more of Nick Saban, the way that he talks about the process and Georgia's internal standard and what they're doing every single week. He understands humility is only a week away. And so if you think they're somehow looking past Kentucky, you are very, very much mistaken. Kentucky has their undivided attention, and the mission for Georgia is still the mission. 1-0 each and every week to Atlanta and beyond. That is what's in front of the Dogs, and they are still in hunting mode. They're going to get their best shot from everybody around them. When you got that block G on your helmet, you get the absolute best from your opponent. I promise you, it's their Super Bowl. For Georgia, though, the main thing's the main thing. Go 1-0, uphold the standard internally. So for Kentucky, like we already talked about a little bit at the opening of this program, they're limping. Lost to Vanderbilt. It's humbling. It's a humbling thing to lose to a program that hadn't won an SEC game in I don't know how many games. They got the streak broken. They're limping, and like I said, they're going to give their best punch to Georgia. Like, you want to know some way to salvage some pride is to go and knock off the number one team in the country. I promise you. Coach Stoops and company, they would love to do that. So are they hurting a little bit from this past week? Sure, but they are not wasting any time licking their wounds because they understand they got the big dog coming to their house. Tremendous opportunity for them. I always say at the beginning of every show, but the way that we break down these games is based on hinge points. And so depending on which way these matchups swing, we think that gives whoever that favors a better chance to win the football game. So the first hinge point that I'm looking at in this game, who gets better position in terms of the arm wrestle? Like whenever you arm wrestle somebody, you and I both know that thing is won or lost in the first 1 to 2 seconds. The equivalent of that in this game to me is like the first quarter and a half. If Georgia jumps out early, let's say Georgia gets up 10-0 in the first quarter, well, they're so physical, they're so multiple offensively, they're so freakish defensively to where they can sort of just tilt that wrist, apply that pressure, use that strength and physicality, and just make you submit. Kentucky's a good football team, but quite frankly, they're scoring 22 points a game. Will Levis, the NFL draft loves him, hasn't been able to muster a ton of offense for Kentucky. So we'll leave that there. But with how good Georgia is in the trenches, if they're able to just play that kind of bully ball up front, they're running for 200 yards a game, they're giving up less than 100 rushing yards a game. If they're able to just sort of force that submission, it's going to be tough the rest of the way. It's going to be tough the rest of the way for Kentucky. Now, on the flip side of that, for Kentucky, if you can draw first blood, and we say this a lot when we break down games with Kentucky, to me, it starts with some sort of explosive play in that first quarter. So Will Levis got to live up to that first-round grade, especially in the first 15 minutes of play. Whether it's Dane Key going deep, whether it's Berrien Brown, Tavian Robinson, somebody has to make an explosive play vertically in the pass game because guess what that does to the defense? Causes them to mellow out a little bit, have to respect the deep pass a little bit more because you just got hurt on it. And then you can lean on who your best player is. And Will Levis is phenomenal. If you say he's the best player on Kentucky's roster, I wouldn't argue with you too much. But the best player, who needs to be the best player, rather, in this game, to me at least, is Chris Rodriguez. He is the individual that if they win the game, it will be because of him. He's averaging right around 5.5 yards a carry. If they can get out to, let's even say, a 7-point lead, much less, if they get a 3-point lead and can kind of hold that, kind of a stalemate, going back to that arm wrestling metaphor, if they can force a stalemate and just feed Chris Rodriguez and have some success on the ground with the secondary having to play back and respect that, that's going to bode well. And the longer this game stretches, the more opportunity there is for weird stuff to happen, which sounds funny to say out loud, but anytime you have a 20-point dog fighting against the number one ranked team in the country, you need some weird things to happen. And staying in the game, causing Georgia to have to play 4 quarters in a game where I promise you, nobody wants to play 4 quarters when they're 20-point favorites, and it's late in the year, and Kirby Smart said it, this is the time of the year people start turning down contact, and Chris Rodriguez seeks contact. that favors Kentucky the longer this kind of game goes. So one way that this could get weird, in my opinion, Berrien Brown is a freakish return man for Kentucky, only a freshman, actually from this area of Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken. If he can rip off a couple of big returns, much like he did against Ole Miss, that could be kind of the leveling of the playing field. Now, it's a very big if. Again, weird things have to happen that you can't necessarily account for. We're going to try to do it on this program, but that would be what I would look for Kentucky if you were going to have a chance in this game. Also, should mention that Will Levis, his offensive line isn't great. Going to touch more on that in a second. At least when it comes to pass pro, they're not great. Get him moving. We saw them against Florida do a really good job using play action, rolling him out, making sure he's not just a standing target back there. Because if he's a standing target, Georgia will tee off on him. So the first quarter is paramount to success, especially for Kentucky. Because if Georgia gets the upper hand, Georgia gets that lean, could be over before it gets started. Second hinge point I'm looking at, and this is not really a hinge point so much as a statement. Let's just be real with ourselves here. We talk about how Kentucky could pull off the upset. This game is about Georgia. This game is about what version of Georgia shows up. And that's not to say a bad version of Georgia has ever shown up in any game, but I think the question that helps me illustrate this point best, what version of Georgia would have to be there for an upset? In addition to that, how much better would Kentucky have to play from their average performance? Georgia scoring 41 points a game right now. They're allowing right around 12. Kentucky's scoring 23 points a game. They're allowing right around 20. Based on my math, a 60% effective Georgia would be right around 24 points scored. If you can somehow force Georgia to score 24 points, that's probably the world you want to live in if you're Kentucky, but I think a lot of it does hinge on what's Georgia's approach. We praise them so much on this show because of what they do internally. I promise you, this game will be tough for Georgia because it's an opponent. You're going to get their best shot and all that. The toughest thing for Georgia is the week of practice before Kentucky. Like Bloody Tuesday, all that they do behind closed doors in Athens, that's what really sets the tone for this game. And so if they can have a good week of practice behind closed doors, they can control the internal and build forward and not eat that rat poison like Nick Saban likes to talk about, they should be in good shape. If they do come out there with like a 60% version of themselves, which is a very big if, but I'm telling you, that's what it would take, then maybe this becomes an interesting matchup. Even if they do score 24 points, Kentucky still has their work cut out for them. But I go back to that whole statement I did to start this part of the show, as part of the segment. It's about Georgia. If Georgia doesn't beat Georgia, they're going to be in good shape. And that's kind of the backbreaker for me in this whole thing. The size and the speed of Georgia defensively is just like a storm for Kentucky. You know it's coming. You saw it on film. You've read the scouting report. You know they got some dogs. No pun intended. They got some dudes. They have a very unique blend of size, but even more so, I think, team speed. And so that defensive line, scary, right? Jalen Carter, going to play for an NFL team here very, very soon. But on top of that, you got guys like Smile Munden. You got Javon Bullard, potentially, if he's able to go and is healthy, has a little contusion going on right now. We'll see if he's able to play. But he's a freak. Talk about toughness, size, speed. I think that's just going to overwhelm Kentucky because Kentucky isn't a team that's going to necessarily spread it out and try and take advantage of angles and get you out of position. Kentucky runs a pro-style offense, meaning we're going to line it up, we're going to hand it to our guys, we're going to do play action, and we're going to try and win our matchups. Every single matchup in this game, I don't care how you look at it, it favors Georgia. Supplement that with the freakish athleticism we just talked about with Georgia and what they're not giving up on the ground, so you can't really set up the pass too well. And then in addition to that, the offensive line for Kentucky is near dead last in terms of sack percentage with their snaps. Of all of their snaps, 13% of those are resulting in sacks. It's tough for Will Levis. Just drew the short end of the stick. You check the weather app, and you got the storm coming. That is the Georgia defense. So for our prediction, I think we see Will Levis get forced into some turnovers. I think the offense for Georgia just continues to progress forward. I mean, I didn't even mention Stetson Bennett at all in this game. I haven't even mentioned him once in this breakdown. Whether he has a big day through the air, whether he turns around and hands it to McIntosh, Dejan Edwards, pick your poison. The Dogs will force Kentucky to submit, and they just continue to keep the main thing, and they go 1-0 this week. I think they cover that spread, and they win the game 43-17 at Kentucky's place. The Dogs are rolling. I've said it before. Kirby Smart and company, they're on a tear. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.